Hi everyone, my name is Jess and welcome to my channel, Jess and Romancelandia, where I talk about happily ever afters and all of that wonderful business. It's been a few weeks since I uploaded a video to this channel. I did shoot one a couple of weeks ago, but I ended up being a little bit disappointed with the structure of it, so I thought I would come back today with a video that I know that I will love filming, which is every single 5-star book that I've read this year. This has been a very voracious reading year for me. In the first sort of 3 months of the year I had an hour commute either way to work every day, during which I read, and since lockdown I've been getting a lot more reading done as well, so it's meant that I've read upwards of 80 books so far this year, which I am insanely proud of and happy with, because it's meant that I've got to get to some books that I've been meaning to read for ages. Whilst my sort of average rating of the year so far has been around 3.5 stars, there have been some absolute standouts, and those are all of the ones that I'm going to talk about today. So for me, a 5-star book isn't necessarily about content or structure or innovation. It just means for me a book that I adored, a book that I didn't want to put down, a book that I know I will go back to many times in the future. So that's the sort of criteria that we're looking at with these books. But without any further ado, let's just get into the list. So the first 5-star read for me way back in January was The Duchess War by Courtney Milan. So The Duchess War is the first book in her Brother Sinister series, which is one of my favourite series of all time. I actually read this series out of order, and I think that The Duchess War was the final one of the entire series I've read, despite coming first chronologically in that series. But I didn't love it any less for having read it that way. The Duchess War follows a young woman named Miss Minerva Lane, who has actually changed her name after struggling to escape a scandal from her past. To kind of keep that scandal under wraps in a society that is so driven by gossip and rumours, Minerva kind of adapts this identity as a wallflower and tries to stay out of the public gaze, at least until she attracts the attention of the very liberal Duke of Claremont, Robert. This book encapsulates everything I love about Courtney Milan as an author. Not only is it deeply romantic and sexy, but it also has two incredibly well fleshed out characters and knows perfectly how to balance real historical detail with the well-loved tropes of the genre. It's an absolutely wonderful read, as is the whole Brother Sinister series, so I would definitely recommend this book and anything by Courtney Milan if you haven't picked up already. My next 5-star read of the year was actually a series, and that is the Society of Gentlemen series by KJ Charles, who is one of my all-time favourite historical romance authors. The Society of Gentlemen series revolves around a society of gentlemen who kind of go by the name of Ricardians, which is after their leader, Sir Richard. These men are united by the bonds of friendship and by the fact that they are all attracted to men in a society in which homosexuality was just not only not talked about but not accepted by the law or by society in general. KJ Charles has described this as the most political of all of her works, and that is definitely true. My personal favourite in the series, which is the second book, A Seditious Affair, follows a romance between a Tory politician and a radical pamphleteer, and she really doesn't shy away from the complex politics or historical context or societal nuances that come into play when it comes to this couple. It's just a wonderful series. It's definitely more detail heavy, more context heavy than some of the other historical romances out there, but that just made it all the more intriguing to me because I was finding out things that I'd never known about this period of history before. So I'd really recommend it if you're interested in LGBTQ+ romance, if you're interested in Regency history. It's a wonderful place to start. My next 5-star read of the year was Under Lock by Miranda Zapata. Mariana Zapata is very well known for her slow burn romances. I've loved many of them and I've mentioned many of them on this channel before, but my personal favourite of hers is Under Lock. Under Lock follows a young woman named Iris who moves in with her half-brother Sonny, who is involved in a motorcycle gang. Through Sonny, Iris gets a job as a receptionist at the local tattoo parlour, where she kind of enters into a complex, banterful, hate-to-love flirtation with Dexter Locke, who is also a member of the motorcycle crew. Mariana Zapata has said that Under Lock was born from her imagining what Sons of Anarchy would be like if there wasn't as much cheating going on, and it's just a wonderful romance novel. I'm not a big fan of motorcycle club romance novels. I don't really like the gender dynamics that often come in with it, but I ended up really flying through this one and loving it so much more than I thought I would, so this is definitely a strong 5-star recommendation. recommendation from me. My next 5-star read is definitely a contender for my favourite read of the year, and that is Heated Rivalry by Rachel Reed. This is the second book in her Game Changer series, which is a contemporary MM series revolving around hockey players, and it follows two rivals, Ilya Rozanov and Shane Hollander. These two men have been rivals on the ice since they were 18, 19 years old, but unbeknownst to the rest of the public, they have also been lovers in private for many of those years as well. This book spans something like 8 to 10 years and looks at how their relationship evolves from competitive conflict to friends with benefits to a much deeper connection, and Rachel Reed has recently confirmed that this will have a sequel coming out in late 2021 or early 2022, so I'm really excited to see where she takes Ilya and Shane's story from here, because like I said, this was an easy 5-star read for me and one of my favourite books of the year. The next book on this list is another contemporary, which is Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. I put off reading this book for so long because it was so incredibly hyped up that I just started getting really worried that I wouldn't actually like it as much as everybody seems to love it. But my fears were very unfounded, as again this was one of my favourite reads of this year, an easy 5 stars to give. Red, White and Royal Blue follows the fictional first son of the United States, Alex, as he has to fabricate a media friendship with the Prince of England, Henry, only for their fabricated media friendship to evolve into a less fabricated romantic relationship. Red, White and Royal Blue is wonderfully well written. It had me laughing out loud at times and swooning at others, and I really loved how structurally Casey McQuiston works in love letters from queer couples of the past, and she really uses this to reflect on queer politics of today. It was just a wonderfully profound story that still managed to retain the spirit of a rom-com, and I adored it. The next 5-star read for me was a Julia Quinn, which was super exciting because a year or so ago the Duke and I became one of the first romance novels, one of the first historical romance novels that I ever read, and whilst I loved that, this book is one that gained a place on my 5-star list, and it is The Secret Diaries of Miss Miranda Cheeva. This is a Regency romance that follows a young woman named Miss Miranda Cheeva who, when she was a young girl, developed a massive crush on her best friend's older brother. After witnessing Miranda's social struggles, this older brother suggests that Miranda starts to keep a diary to record all of her thoughts and feelings, and so Miranda does, and obviously because she is like a 13-year-old girl when the story starts, a lot of it revolves around her crush on this guy. The story then fast forwards to 5-10 years later when Miranda is still keeping her diary, but the relationship between her and this man is starting to change. This is just a deeply romantic story, which is something that I think Julia Quinn really excels at. She writes wonderfully romantic stories with really quick, snappy dialogue, and I just loved it. It was classic Julia Quinn, and it was the first book of hers that I'd read outside of the Bridgerton series, and I was really happy to see that I loved this book just as much as I loved that series. My next 5-star read of the year is the Captive Prince trilogy by C.S. Picard. I've mentioned this trilogy so many times on this channel, and I'm not going to go into details now because of how many times I've mentioned it on this channel, but I will link my full review of the series below. All I'm going to say here is it is a high fantasy, slow burn, enemies to lovers with one of the most rewarding character arcs that I have ever read. C.S. Picard is an incredible author. She is the master of subtlety when it comes to word choice and emotion, and it's just one of the most wonderful fantasy series I've ever read, as well as one of the most wonderful romance series I've ever read. The next 5-star read of the year was another series, which is the Hathaways series by Lisa Kleypas. Lisa Kleypas is a very well-known historical romance author within Romancelandia, and it's for a good reason, judging by this series. The Hathaways follows a group of siblings, the Hathaways, when they unexpectedly come into a viscountcy and must learn how to adapt to the ways of upper class society. It has just such a wonderful range of main and side characters and has some of the most romantic storylines I've read in historical romance. So this is a great series to pick up if you want to get into historical romance, or if you're a fan that hasn't read anything by Lisa Kleypas yet. My next recommendation is the Bear, Otter and the Kid series by TJ Klune. I had never read anything by TJ Klune before picking up this series, but the first book, Bear, Otter and the Kid, was on Kindle Unlimited, so I figured I couldn't go wrong, and it ended up being one of my easiest 5-star reads of the year. This book follows a young man who goes by the nickname of Bear, who is forced to become the carer of his younger brother when their mother ups and leaves them. In the midst of all of this confusion and of trying to learn how to care for a young child, Bear starts to develop feelings for his friend's older brother, who he calls Otter, and it just becomes a story about brotherhood and the discovery of sexuality and second chances. TJ Klune is one of the funniest authors out there, in my opinion, and Bear, Otter and the Kid derives most of its charm from being able to balance really deep, pure emotion with just laugh out loud scenes. I adore this book, and I've adored everything else by TJ Klune that I've read since. The next book I gave 5 stars to this year was Lead by Kylie Scott. Lead is the 3rd book in the Stage Dive series, which follows the various band members of the rock band Stage Dive as they find love. Lead follows, as the title suggests, the lead singer of the band, Jimmy Ferris, who we meet in the 1st book as a very troubled man struggling with drug and alcohol addiction. By the time we get to his book, he has recovered from this, he's been through rehab, but he is still told by his label to keep a companion around to make sure that he doesn't relapse. The companion that he and his band members choose is a young woman named Lena, who is a budding photographer who refuses to take any of Jimmy's shit, and what proceeds from there is a wonderfully snarky romance that also manages to be incredibly romantic and gives an insight into the recovery from addiction. Next up we have a novella, which is very unusual for me. I read a lot of novellas. I find them to be really great palate cleansers between longer novels, but because I don't really get to spend much time with them, they rarely leave enough of an impression on me to be given 5 stars. But this one was the exception, and it is The Pursuit Of by Courtney Milan. You might be able to tell that I really love Courtney Milan. So this book was part of a collection called Hamilton's Battalion, which is set during the American Civil War and follows soldiers under the command of Alexander Hamilton. So this book follows 2 men on the opposite sides of the war. On the one hand, you have an American soldier named John who is fighting so that his sister's husband doesn't have to, and on the other side you have Henry, who is an upper-class British gentleman who doesn't really have any desire to fight after reading Thomas Jefferson's writings on the equality of man. These 2 originally meet on the battlefield, although when John spares Henry's life, Henry declares that he is in John's debt and agrees to accompany John on the journey back to his family. Along the way, the 2 engage in debates about the freedom of man, about liberty, about how issues such as race, gender and sexuality play into that, and they also fall in love. I loved this novella. The dynamic between the 2 men was genius. On the one hand you have a very practical, cynical John, and on the other hand you have a very innocent, lovely, oblivious man in the form of Henry, but together they have some really interesting philosophical and political debates that leads to them both becoming more well-rounded characters as a result. It is as close to perfectly written as I believe a novella can be, and I would highly, 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 highly recommend it. The next 5-star read of the year for me was The Wallflower Wager by Tessa Dare. Tessa Dare's books can kind of be a hit or miss for me. I tend to either really love them or be kind of ambivalent slash not a huge fan, but The Wallflower Wager was a massive win and stands out for me alongside any Duchess will do in terms of the best Tessa Dare novel in my opinion. The Wallflower Wager is the 3rd book in the Girl Meets Duke series, and it follows Lady Penelope Campion, who is an animal lover. When Gabriel Duke, a self-made man known for ruining upper-class families, moves in next to Penny, he is determined to help her find new homes for her animals so it doesn't put off potential investors in the property. Along the way, of course, the idealistic Penny and the cynical Gabriel fall in love and find their way to each other, and it is just a lovely story. My favourite aspect of this entire series is the friendships. The central friendship between Penny's circle of women is absolutely beautiful, but an unexpected highlight of this book for me was the relationship that develops between the men. It was just hilariously done, and the banter between them is wonderful. So yes, I love this book, and I'm really excited to see what happens in the 4th book, which is Nicola's book, when that comes out later this year. And the final 5-star read of this year for me so far, which I just finished yesterday as a matter of fact, is Banned Sinister by KJ Charles. Another KJ Charles book. KJ and Courtney Milan have been making several appearances on this list, and I don't think that's going to change for the remainder of the year. Banned Sinister follows a man named Guy Frisbee who is forced to stay at the infamous Rookwood Hall when his sister Amanda falls, breaks her leg, and is taken in by the owner of the hall, Sir Philip Rookwood. Sir Philip has a notorious reputation in society for hosting what is known as the Murder, a group of men who have largely been rejected by society for their scandalous ways. The Frisbees in particular hold resentment towards the Rookwood family due to there being a conflict in their past, and Guy is very surprised to find when he gets to Rookwood Hall that the men are not all that deserving of the notorious reputation that they have. This was a wonderful book, very unlike the other stuff I've read by KJ Charles. It's a very insular novel in that it almost entirely takes place within Rookwood Hall, and because of that I found all of the emotions to be very heightened and just intense. KJ Charles also uses the group at the centre of this novel, known as the Murder, as kind of a stage to discuss political and philosophical debates of the time, and watching Philip and Guy engage in these debates and discussions was just incredibly well done, incredibly written. It's a hugely comforting read, and it has one of the most satisfying happy endings I've read in a long time. Okay, so those are all of the 5-star reads of the year for me so far. I am very hopeful that 2020 brings many more to come. I'd love to know if there are any 5-star books for you that have stood out over the year, so please do leave a comment below. But until next time, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye!